So, I mean, listen, I believe we're witnessing one of the greatest storytellers in the history of mankind assume the presidency of the United States.
Okay.
The story that he tells is the story of making America great again. We've also watched other storytellers like Elon Musk tell the story of a mission to Mars, or tell the story of Neuralink curing
No, you know what?
paralysis.
I don't consider Elon as a storyteller. He's the difference between Trump and Elon is that Trump is he can spin a story and he's not on the spectrum. Elon is he's a different
Maybe,
bird.
but Elon still has captivated a lot of people with the idea of telling the story of going to Mars.
He doesn't tell a story. He makes statements. There's a big difference.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
But the point is, storytelling is the single most powerful capability in the world, in my opinion. That you can have great product and great execution, but if you have bad storytelling, you will likely have a business that does not succeed. You can have great storytelling and a mediocre product and have an extremely successful business. You can be a great leader, a great administrator. Maybe Joe Biden was a great president, but he was a terrible storyteller. And so he's not perceived to be a great president. Donald Trump may not do a good job as president, but he is telling the story of being a great president, and as such is perceived as great. I guess my point is, I believe that the storytelling is vastly more important than the idea that the product is that delivering results is not as important. That telling the story is in and of itself a result.
Yeah, this morning I called this segment Bark or Bite.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's what this is. And I think that we're currently witnessing this, by the way, this is not designed to be a political discussion at all. It's just easier because one person's at the forefront. But I wanted to talk about this as in business as well. Like CEOs, business people, politicians. Yes, Trump is a storyteller and he's good at that. There are other politicians. Biden was not a storyteller. I don't think Kamala Harris was not a storyteller. There's clearly the Americans value storytelling probably more than any other culture I've ever been around. When you think about things like, I know you have, a lot of experience in in Russia, just say as example, they do not tell stories. Sure. Eastern Europe is not about storytelling. Most of Europe is not really built around storytellers. Asia is not built around storytellers. Most of the people that run governments and businesses all around the world, it's very secretive. It's very direct, simplified, secret. I guess secretive is the best word. But America is the land of walk down the street, walk up to a random stranger, and you can basically, they'll tell you their whole life story. I mean, that's who we are as a culture. And it's one of the things that makes America special. And it's also one of the things that differentiates us from everywhere else. So America puts huge value on really good storytellers. Sometimes really good storytellers can take advantage of the situation. And sometimes, really good storytellers that's all they are. It's all bark. But for the majority of good storytellers, they have a huge advantage. Now, the truly the most successful people have to be able to tell the story and deliver, because ultimately that's how you're measured. Legacies are not just about storytelling. Legacies, in order to have the longevity required to build a successful legacy, it has to be more than just storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times in politics, storytelling can get you pretty far. A lot of times in business, storytelling can get you. I mean, I think right off the top of my head, I think about people like, grifters like Bernie Madoff, grifters like, I can't think of her name, the Theranos woman,
Oh yeah, Elizabeth Holmes.
Elizabeth Holmes was an unbelievable storyteller. I mean, she raised $1 billion, just telling stories. I mean, so did Bernie Madoff.
Who was the WeWork guy? The WeWork kid was also a big storyteller.
The WeWork kid. I mean,
I forget his name, but yeah.
There is so many people. I mean, in his own crazy way, Sam Bankman-Fried was a storyteller. I mean, he's a liar, but a storyteller. And
most great storytellers are liars. Thus, stories get better when you use lies, because you can then manipulate the story in a way that's perfect to hook people, because you're not wedded to facts.
Well, you do get storytellers. Like, I'll give you an example. Jensen Huang from NVIDIA is a great storyteller. And I mean, I have to assume he's telling the truth, because it's a $3.5 trillion company. I don't think that's built on a house of cards or lies. And I think that there are people, and he is the perfect example, that have built these amazing companies that can tell a story. Jack Ma used to be that way with Alibaba, and there are other American storytellers the same way that have built incredible companies. To a certain extent, Warren Buffett is a great storyteller. And these. So there's lots of success that way. But I think just in general, people that can tell a story, which is, the bark piece of this, it's of incredible value. And Trump is probably the best example, because to be leader of the free world with I don't think it'd be a shock to anybody. With his IQ, to be leader of the free world is freaking shocking. And that's all I can say. And so his ability to tell a story and convince people.
Evidence that storytelling, that's how powerful storytelling is.
That is.
Even if you're not really qualified,
right? If
you're a great storyteller, you can be the most powerful person on earth.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's people in his administration that have a similar thing. You'll get to like a Dr. Oz or somebody like that can tell a story.
Yeah.
There's a lot of TV personalities that can tell stories that end up in positions that they maybe shouldn't be in, but just based on intelligence, but they end up running companies doing whatever.
So let's assume that obviously we're going to agree storytelling is maybe the most important thing. It's not the only thing. You ultimately got to deliver the goods, blah, blah, blah. The question that occurred to me just in listening to you with this discussion is, because the most legendary storyteller in the negative is the Pied Piper, right? Where he tells you a story that leads you to your demise.
Okay.
But it's such a charismatic, right? And so there's that would be Elizabeth Holmes, right? As a Pied Piper, where it's like this grand story about this medical revolution that is a fraud. On the other hand, this is going to be a little bit cliched, and probably people will be critical of it, but I would argue that certainly in retrospectively, John Kennedy is perceived to be a great storyteller when he was president, in a way of telling a story that lifts people up to aspire to to be more than they might otherwise be, or not. Maybe another great example would be MLK, right? The whole "I Have a Dream" speech, where it's storytelling in the positive, where it's such a charismatic story that's told that people, that the world gets better, that people move in a positive, that it's a unifying.
I mean, there's a lot of
uplifting.
There's a lot of politicians. I mean, Ronald Reagan was a storyteller. Ronald Reagan was.
But what I'm getting at is, so you have storytelling in the most extreme positive version, and the most extreme negative version, and everything in between, obviously.
Yeah. I mean,
where do you think we are in the spectrum of storytelling right now? Do you think storytelling right now is being used for good or evil?
Well, it's funny because when I think back through earlier in my life, a lot of politicians, whether it, Jimmy Carter was a storyteller, Ronald Reagan was a storyteller, to a certain extent, the Bush Sr. was a storyteller. No doubt, Clinton was a storyteller. Obama was a great speaker, a good storyteller. Trump, a good storyteller. I mean, Biden is the first president I can think of. Bush Jr., I'm not really sure. I mean, I think he's a decent storyteller, but I think Biden was the first president I could think of that really couldn't tell a story. So we don't have a lot of experience with like presidents that can't tell stories. But what has happened is that I feel like in certain cases, both in business and in politics and sports and everything else, we've started to blur the lines a little bit, which I think that's the scary thing. Blur the lines meaning there's a difference between being able to spin a story and being truthful with, with the public and whoever you're spinning the story to. Like I might have not liked Ronald Reagan, but I never felt like he was lying to me. When he was telling the story, I kind of felt that there was a genuine aspect to it. And I think that's a little different than where we are today. That's what I think. That's
meaning you think that right now you think Trump tells stories in a way that are deceptive.
Yeah. Or manipulative.
Can you be the CEO of a public company? Because I don't want to go into the whole Trump chap.
No, I don't either. Right? I think.
But do you think that being a CEO of a big company is being a great storyteller a necessary requirement to be a successful CEO at a high level?
Yes. You have to be able to raise capital to build a successful company. And you cannot raise capital. It is very difficult to raise capital on concept and or whatever you've built alone. It is really, really challenging. If you can't articulate your story, one of the things I love to tell students when we're doing seminars about going on to the next stage and jobs and all that kind of stuff is one of the greatest things you can do to differentiate yourself is be able to articulate your story. Like one of your greatest strengths is your ability to tell stories. You are a storyteller, Dylan Radigan. And wherever you are in your life, that is one of your strongest assets. It has been, ever since I first heard about you. Your ability to tell stories.
3 years old.
But I mean, that's a strength. Being able to articulate certain things and who you are and what you believe is a strength.
Do you believe, how much can I distort like in other words, the risk is, I guess what I'm getting at is I'm thinking if I have a really charismatic storyteller who's a CEO, I can that's Adam Neumann. That's who I'm thinking of.
Yeah, Adam Neumann.
Or also, what's his name? Travis. Who's the Uber kid? Travis
Kalanick.
Yeah, those really are examples of what I would say is storytelling that does not. That I won't say storytelling for bad, but storytelling in a way that distorts reality to the advantage of the storyteller and to the disadvantage of the customer or the investors.
Well, I mean, Adam Neumann did it, as well as anybody's ever done it without going to jail. Other people have done it, you could argue more effectively, but they went to jail. Adam Neumann, he avoided the jail, but obviously is able to tell a story. I mean,
but do you think we're in a world right now where the storytelling today an asset to society or a liability? I guess is what I'm getting at. Do you like it? It's indisputable. Storytelling's never been more relevant, more important, more powerful. Blah blah blah. What is in dispute is whether that storytelling right now is being used in a way that is helpful to us or not.
In an era of artificial intelligence taking over, where storytelling is just some mechanical output from, is a server, a computer just spitting, is a software platform just spitting out text. storytelling is probably more valuable than ever. The 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 raw emotion is something that you can't get from AI, and kind of that ability to, you know, to make you feel something from, you know, from whatever you're talking about is something that's special. And I think it's probably more valuable than ever, because when you go back and you think, you know, like I think about like my parents' era and stuff, and I think about like these great, you know, preachers and priests and people that would give sermons and just lecturers and stuff, and these speakers were just, you know, it was incredible. You just sit there, you're mesmerized by their ability to carry the entire room, or, you know, a country or whatever. And it's a lost art. It's a lost art because we've all become, you know, we're all, you know, face down on our phones and face down on, you know, watching TV.
But wouldn't the kids argue that modern storytelling is short form video, like TikTok?
No doubt about it.
Storytelling is no longer giving a speech in Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park in London. It is short form video editing.
Yeah, I think that that's very fair, and I think that to a certain extent that is the modern version of giving a speech, is doing a 3 minutes in your car, you know, talking about something, but
posting a TikTok video or an Instagram reel.
Sure, but the difference is you're not going to raise money to build a company by doing that. And if you're going to go out and you're going to raise a couple of $1 billion, you better be able to tell the story.
Mm-hmm. And be able to back it up on some level.
And have more, and be able to back it up.
I mean, because I wonder the degree to which there's a lot of really interesting products and companies out there that never come to being because the leadership can't tell the story. And that must be a widespread problem. Where there's good things that never happen because the storytelling just isn't there.
There are literally hundreds of millions of great ideas. There is a fraction of 1%, like a 1/1000th of 1%, that actually get funded and get seen through fruition from start to finish, because they just don't have the concentration or the resources and the capital and everything else to pull it off. Most successful entrepreneurs can articulate their story. Some get through just on raw ideas, but it's super rare. And, you know, and most that are not successful just simply cannot tell the story.
Can you succeed with a great product? And going to the bark bite thing, can I do it all with bite and no bark?
From scratch, no. But you can take over. You can be a CEO that takes over a company, an existing company, with no bark. But you can't build something from scratch without bark.
With no bark.
Right. Like
bark
you can
is
take over
creation and
yeah. Like Jamie Dimon's a perfect example. Here's a guy that has trouble. He has trouble communicating, I think. I don't think he's a good communicator. But he's running, you know, the largest bank in the world. You know, it's and I think Elon Musk is a perfect example. He can barely talk. And just for whatever reason, and it's, you know, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg doesn't do a good job talking. I mean, these guys have a hard time talking. And I think that, you know, but they're already in situations where they've been successful, so they get away with it.
Are we at risk right now because storytelling is so powerful and the current president is so good at it?
Yeah.
Like when with Elizabeth Holmes, she could tell a great story, but when she puts the industry at risk, they can put her in jail because they prove she's a fraud and a liar.
Sure.
But with the president, if you prove he or she is a fraud and a liar, there's really no recourse.
No, the president.
It's not like the DOJ comes in and says,
no.
"Oh, you stole a bunch of Tom's money with your fake biotech." That is
when you're president of the United States or leader of the free world. That is That's the special badge you get. You have a hall pass. There's nothing you can do. Literally nothing you can do. I mean, you have to do something, you have to pull a Nixon. That's the extent of what you have to do. You basically, you got to pull a Nixon.
Well, yeah, I would even argue if Nixon did what Nixon did in the modern day, he would not have had to resign.
Probably not. Probably not. But
does that make you pessimistic? Does that give you concern? Are you worried?
No, I'm not worried at all. Because ultimately, we're too big for that. America is too big to fail. America is way too big to fail. So it doesn't matter. Like, that's why I'm not worried. I mean, things can get screwed up. You can have issues, but America's too big to fail.
What do you think is the best way to be long America? Is it in the dollar, in the bond, or in the stock market?
That's a great question. Well, I mean, the simple answer is, if you were long the dollar or you were long bonds, you're not really long America. You're just, those are cyclical instruments that don't really ever do much. So the real question, I think, is how do you get long America? Do you buy stocks? Do you buy private businesses, or do you buy real estate? Like, I think that's the real question. Like, if you're going to get long America, you wouldn't do it using the dollar or bonds, or gold, because that's not, you would either think our real estate's too cheap, our farmland's too cheap, our different assets are too cheap, or our stock market's too cheap, private or public. That's about it. And I don't know which way. I mean, for me, it's a no-brainer, but I don't know. I can't say that for somebody else.
It's a no-brainer, meaning stocks is the way to do it.
Well, yeah. I mean, businesses, yeah. Because I like liquidity, and I don't understand.
Right.
I don't understand real estate and the illiquid nature of real estate and land purchases and that kind of stuff, and asset purchases that you can't sell. I don't really get it.
And what is the story, other than being too big to fail? What is the most compelling story to be long America at this moment?
Well, is that? I mean, I don't know if everybody would agree with this, but it's that we have the deepest pool of liquidity, which means that we have the deepest and largest pool of liquidity, which means that if you believe that everything follows the money, then that's the argument. See, I believe that you can't have growth and you can't have this outlier success without money. And you have to follow the flow of money. And the flow of money has never left this country. It's had a few situations where, China got some and some other places got some for a while, but it's really all back here. And the flow of money is here. And until that changes, the deepest pool of liquidity and the most depth of capital is here. And until that changes, this will be the place.
And there's even if the president tells a bunch of stories that prove not to be true, that you don't think that the president of the United States can put that at risk, basically?
No chance. No chance. And
what about the idea that the only country that could rival America is China, and that if America continues to be belligerent, that it opens doors for China to come into places where they've never been able to come before, come into Canada, come into Mexico, come into Europe?
The funny thing is that's not what America may be belligerent, but China has always been worse. As far as belligerent goes, China's off the charts. So we can look at our administration here and say we're belligerent, we're this, we're that. We're a fraction of China is so dysfunctional that we're a fraction of that. What scares me about China is not the government being able to get their act together and overtake all that. What scares me about China is the sheer size and the amount of wealth and the speed at which they get stuff done. I kind of wrote about it this week, and I think we saw a glimpse of it into the whole deep seek situation that we talked about before. But if China can, the way China turns itself around, because in spite of their government, which is just absolutely horrible, in spite of them, they could make a charge because they have so much smarts and so much energy, and they're able to do things so much quicker and better in some cases than we are. That's the scary part. It's not that their government's ever going to get their act together and that they're going to out-government us. I don't think that's ever going to happen. The risk that I see in China is that they're going to outsmart us because they're going to be faster and they're going to be less perfect, but they're going to be faster.
Because I look at it and I feel like the only rival to the United States in this sort of multipolar global, power battle is China.
Oh, right now? Yeah, I mean,
there's no other country that has any relevance in terms of peak power on the earth.
Just based on size and technological skill, education, and everything else, I mean, you'd have to put India in the team picture, but I don't think they're there yet. But I think they're inching their way into the team picture. I think India is further behind than China, and so I think it's China and America, and then China, then India. But I would say that if there was an outlier, it'd be India. But I think it's right now it's China's role to lose as the front runner, and
as the chief rival to America, you're saying?
Yeah. And the mistake that we can make, which I really hope we don't make, but the mistake that we can make is trying to legislate or trade war or tariff China out of the equation, because that will backfire. What you want to do is let everything flow freely so that we can compete freely. Because if you can't compete freely, you will lose. As soon as you mess with Mother Nature, you screw everything up. And that's what scares me. And that's what I want to make sure that or that's what I want to, that's what I want to
What does losing to China look like? Does it mean that the locus of technology moves to China? That basically instead of Facebook and Google and Amazon, that it's Huawei and Alibaba and DeepSeek? I mean, is that what losing looks like? Where the Chinese technology companies are the global standard as opposed to the American technology companies?
I think that's what it looks like.
TikTok.
I think that the Chinese companies get to be worth, $5 trillion before the American companies, get past another shot past $3 trillion, that kind of thing. I think they just overtake us market cap wise and, revenue wise and growth wise, that kind of thing. I think that's the scary thing that, that the U.S. needs to protect against.
I mean, whether it's legislating that you can't use Huawei phones, which are technologically superior to any other phone,
that kind
or
of stuff
legislating that you can't use TikTok. Do you think you can protect yourself legislatively from DeepSeek or TikTok or Huawei? Ultimately,
think about why China is in second place. If they have all this stuff, like they have the billion people, they have this unbelievable technology, they got a great school systems, all this stuff. Why are they so far behind on a GDP scale, and why are they so far behind in everything else? And the answer is because this is the policy that they put in place originally. Like what we're trying to do now here is what set China back as far back as they are. We're messing we're messing with our economic structure, and we're putting into
Meaning
place
a centralized economy, basically, like using the central government to try to protect
an
the economy.
enclosed economy. Remember, China didn't want to open up their borders. China basically closed off their borders. Hey, you know what? No American companies here, no this, no that, all this stuff. What happens? They fell way behind us. If they had just left everything wide open and blown the whole thing up, they'd be probably equal with us now. What we're doing is making all the same mistakes right now that China made that set them back 2 decades. And that's what I don't want to see. And that's the scariest piece. What's happening right now in America scares me, not for all the reasons that it scares everybody else. It scares me because this is exactly what China did. And this is what messed them up. To a certain extent, it's what Japan did. And this is what messed them up. You have to, in 2025, you cannot think of things, ethnocentrically. It has to be global thought.
But I mean, the theory is if you let China keep TikTok, or if everybody's using Huawei phones instead of iPhones, or if everybody's using DeepSeek instead of ChatGPT, that the Chinese intelligence agencies now are in control of the world because they're now gathered. Like right now, the American intelligence agencies collect all the data from Instagram and our iPhones. And instead, that basically the intelligence gathering apparatus is now supported by the universal use of technology. And so the only question is, which intelligence agencies get access to all the information, the Americans or the Chinese?
Does that really concern you? I mean, that's not that.
It doesn't concern me at all, but I'm saying but that's the political posture. Why can't we have TikTok? Why can't we have Huawei? Why do we have to sort of protect ourselves against DeepSeek? Even if it means we're taking a lesser technology, it's because we can't allow the Chinese intelligence agencies to know what Tom Sosnoff likes on his pancakes or whatever.
Is that really what it is? Or are they just telling you that's because so that the question is, I don't believe that. And, I mean, it's amazing to me that, we're worried about the Chinese intelligence, but we're not worried about anybody else's. That doesn't really, I mean, are you any less concerned with Mark Zuckerberg having all your information, Facebook and Amazon and Google owning every single thing about you? Does it bother you?
No, I just think it's in the interest of the American government to protect. Like, if you're the American government, you would rather have your intelligence agencies control the information platforms.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just saying, I don't,
that it's an excuse.
It's an excuse.
That the idea that they're protecting you and I from anything is a joke. That they're protecting them. They're protecting their interests, not our interests.
That's exactly right. So, getting back to the initial discussion on just, bark versus bite, which is so interesting to me because there is no question that you and I both agree that how important the bark is. But the bite piece of this thing, man, you know what? I'm all for opening everything up.
Explain that.
Well, you do know.
What do you mean opening? When you say I'm all for opening everything up, what does that mean?
Because by limiting trade with places like Mexico, do you know what's going to be, and Canada, but Canada to a lesser extent, do you know that within, I'd say, 1 decade, Mexico is going to be competing with us on everything? Tech companies, manufacturing companies, drug companies. I mean, the speed at which they develop stuff, because they're smaller, more nimble, lots of really smart people, lots of money. And the fact that we force them to do that, we basically, by closing down trade, you're essentially forcing them to speed up the process to go after you.
You're saying the trade barriers just incentivize circumvention.
Exactly.
It's a short-term solution that creates an intermediate and long-term disaster.
Yes, it actually works the opposite way. We talked about, you and I talked about correlation this morning, and we were, I was joking that, in just 4 or 5 years, the correlation between, Tesla and a certain political party has completely gone from inverse to highly correlated. It's the same thing happens so fast in the world of business and innovation that within a very short period of time, as soon as you shut somebody out, they figure it out. And then they come back.
It's a counterproductive action. For me to shut you down is the worst thing I should do.
That's the thing that scares me the most about all this tariffs and trade wars, is how short-sighted it is. It has the exact opposite effect of what it is intended to do. What it does is it forces those other companies, rather than to use your products, then to go out and just do it themselves. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this. It's like, screw it. You know what? You guys stink anyway. We'll build it ourselves. It'll be better. And we'll do it faster, and we'll do it cheaper, and it'll be better. That's the whole DeepSeek thing.
Does it affect your investment thesis?
No.
Here, let me just give you a little bit more context.
No.
Because the argument an argument that can easily be made, and you can support it to a certain degree, is that the idea of the United States as the singular global power is over, and that now we're moving to that ever since World War II, you had two global powers, Russia and the United States. That then after 1989, it became one singular global power since 1989, which is the United States, for the last 33 years or whatever it is. And then we're now at a moment with the Trump presidency, whether it's the withdrawal of USAID, whether it's the tariffs are the two probably best examples, where you're moving from a singular power to a multipolar world, where there's a China world, there's a Russia world, there's a Mexico world.
Well, just think about it. Common sense says what?
Common sense says what about what?
Common sense would say that in 2025, what makes more sense? 10 individual worlds or one big world?
Well, common sense would say one big world, just because of the technology layer.
There you go. There is no argument to be made for 10 little separate worlds. There's no argument.
Right. It's absurd.
It's absurd.
I agree.
That's what I don't understand about what people are thinking right now. It's so short-sighted. There is no world.
Because there's only one world, whether you want to believe it or not, because of the technology layer.
That's exactly right. In the end, there's only one world. And to try to break it apart because you're selfish or making yourself great is idiotic.
I think that the one world environment is basically it's like I get, because the opportunity. If I'm China, I'm saying there is one world and I'm the center of it.
All right, that's fine. You can try.
And you're saying the reason China has a steep hill to climb on that is because they're historically much more belligerent than America. Yeah. So even if America says there's not one world, there's 10 worlds, and we're just gonna keep our own little world.
Yeah.
And we don't care about your world, Mexico, Canada, Europe, Brazil, whoever. I guess I'm just trying to think what the most significant risk actually is. Like, is Brazil going to create, like, in other words, is basically, are you going to end up with one world no matter what? No matter what the U.S. president does, no matter what the tariffs are?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but why torture everybody? We're going to get there anyway. Like you said, let's just do it, that's what I understand.
Get there quickly.
It's dumb. It's short-sighted. It doesn't make any sense. It's not a plan. it's not a plan. It's a story. It's not a plan. It's just PR. It's crappy advertising. That's it.
It's just bad PR that plays to the most primitive instincts and
Yeah.
fears of a political
Yeah.
persuasion.
Yeah. Exactly.
Does it represent economic risk of consequence? Does it affect your investment thesis, or does it just affect you psychologically, where you're just irritated?
It might slow it down. I don't think it affects it. I don't think it kills it. It just might slow things down. Might slow down growth.
Are you more inclined to own China? I know you've always kind of wanted to own China.
I mean,
in general,
China's still backwards. China's still backwards and messed up and dysfunctional, and Russia's still backwards and messed up and dysfunctional. So I don't think you can own either of those, other than on China on a small level. But that's about it. But
India, can you own India?
There's no real way to own India. It's very difficult. I mean, you can own things outside the U.S., I guess, a little bit, but you got to stay where it's liquid, so your kind of hands are tied. It's just a story. We're just talking, just painting. It's probably not anything near term, but longer term, just to throw it out there so people start thinking. We need people to think again. Like, we need people to have their own opinions and to think about things, and not believe everything everybody says, because a lot of people are just barking. And a lot of times there's a lot of other reasons why they're barking. But Dylan, we have run out of time today. We're up against the clock. It was a good talk. It's something different. I liked it.
Thank you.